been a banner year for government dysfunction in Washington, but even with the shutdown, even with the sequester, and yes, even with the botched rollout of Obamacare, you could arguably say the Pentagon takes the case or should win the Booby Prize for the most dysfunctional government agency. Scott Paltrow is a special enterprise correspondent with Reuters. He's done a series looking at the Pentagon dysfunction. So, Scott, how much waste are we talking about here at the Pentagon?
We're talking about a phenomenal amount of waste. Each year, the Pentagon's budget is between $500 billion and over $600 billion, more than the next, I think, 14 countries' defense budgets put together. But if you look back to 1996, when the Pentagon was first supposed to undergo an audit, more than $8.5 trillion has been
trillion with a T.
Right, has never been audited. Every other federal agency, by law since the early 1990s, not only has been audited, but with rare exceptions, passes an audit. And the Pentagon not only has never passed an audit, has never even been audited because its books are in such shambles.
What are some of the most egregious things you found?
Well, I mean, first of all, in trying to make itself audit ready, and Congress finally has set a deadline of 2017 for this, the military has spent vast sums of money on trying to build new systems. And the amount of waste, I mean, just dwarfs the waste on the Obamacare. For example, one system alone built by the Air Force cost more than $1 billion, took 8 years to build, and then they completely scrapped it as a failure. And then there was another $1 billion failure. So the amount of money wasted just to try to fix this problem is enormous. Then it's an officially recognized practice to simply plug in fake numbers in monthly reports to the Treasury, because the Treasury requires essentially that the Pentagon balance its checkbook every month, and they can't do that because they don't have the records, so they just put in fake numbers to make it look like it balances.
Right, so in 2012, the Pentagon reported $9.2 billion in, quote, reconciling amounts, to your point, to try to make their books match the Treasury's.
Exactly.
Is this an open secret in Washington? Does everybody know that they're doing this?
It's an open secret in the sense that, you know, if you read the footnotes in the annual financial reports of the Army and the Navy and the Defense Department itself, it's disclosed in there. It's been reported by the GAO, and Congress knows it goes on. But until very recently, Congress, which controls the purse strings, has not done anything about it.
Here's my question. The Defense Department's budget is so huge, $500 billion, more than that really in 2012, more than many of the next biggest spending countries combined. Would you say, based on your reporting, that this is the biggest source of waste in the government?
I think it definitely, almost certainly is. It affects the federal deficit. It affects the budget. The Defense Department receives by far the largest share of the annual appropriated budget. And the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, which every year publishes a high-risk list of the biggest threats to the federal government, for the last 17 consecutive years, the Defense Department and its accounting have been on that list.
Right. In addition to not being able to account for the money, you also write that they can't keep track of their weapons, ammunition, and other supplies. So, talk about threats. Is there a national security risk in the Pentagon's dysfunction?
Well, there is a combat risk in the sense that they often don't know what they have and have difficulty. They lose track of it and have difficulty getting it to the units that need it. The bigger problem, though, actually, at least from a financial point of view, is that they have way too much stuff. And even though they know they have way too much stuff, the left hand often doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and so they order even more at higher prices. And so they have these warehouses that are just filled with, 15, 20 years worth of overstock, or things that, were last used in the 1970s. And then the Army has its own separate storage thing where it stores all of the ammunition for all of the military services. And it has stuff in there that they are paying to store that goes back to World War II.
So really quickly, looking forward, in terms of the sequester cuts, the Defense Department is facing $20 billion in cuts in 2014. Military officials, including Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and generals, have said this is a huge problem. This could even impact national security. Do you find that to be false, given your understanding of the glut of inventory they have in some cases and how much money is sloshing around unaccounted accounted for?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that Chuck Hagel and the White House and Congress don't know how the money is slushing around. There is no accounting, so it's all completely opaque where it goes. And so when Chuck Hagel and the others come hat in hand asking for more money and what they need it for, they're basing it purely on their own, I would say, personal priorities rather than on firm knowledge of what actually is needed and, where excess money is that could be cut.